12:33, so I think we're gonna go ahead and get started so we can make sure we get through everything. So thanks for coming today. My name is Jen Miller. I am the academic content manager for secondary science as my primary role, but I am also part of the grading team alongside Carrie Burry, who is with us today, and she's gonna be our tech facilitator. So if you have questions, make sure you pop them in the chat and Carrie will do her best to answer them or bring them up during our question sessions. So I'm gonna ask that everybody just stays on mute just because we have so many people here. But feel free to chat in those questions at any time. All right, Carrie, are we ready?
Everyone has been admitted, but people are still joining us here and there, so.
Yeah, just keep adding. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen with you all and then we'll get started. Okay, so today we're just gonna kind of do a larger overview of rethinking grading for online learning and beyond online learning. So as you start to rethink grading, it's actually going to make your life a lot easier and you can grade things much more efficiently and give feedback more clearly to your students. So this is a very challenging time for all of us. We know that we are going to face a lot of differences in the way that we instruct and the way that we interact with our kids. And so the reason this is kind of being presented now, it's an overview of where the district is headed, but it also gives you some tools to start implementing right now to kind of ease this transition into online learning. So the bit.ly link to this site right here, that's in case you want to get access to this slide deck. You can quickly copy down that bit.ly, and Carrie will also paste it into the chat for you guys. For this session, you'll need your phone or a browser window open, so just keep something next to you. Either one will be fine. We just have a couple questions that we're gonna get feedback on. So today, our conditions for success. Excellence, we're going to be focused and present throughout. Please minimize non-academic use of your phones and other resources around you as we go through this. We keep our microphones muted unless we're in a discussion or a breakout room. We want to embrace our roles as learners, contributors, and designers. And we want to listen and plan for the smallest details. And there are lots of them right now, yeah? We want to ask and answer questions. And we give and seek honest and frank feedback. Please be actively listening and participating. And there's a lot of risks and challenges right now, so let's just own where we are and do the best that we can. So we're gonna start today with a quick poll. So you'll see the address up top, or you can do a text response. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. What grading scale most closely represents what you are going to use or intended to use in your class? So if you're a new teacher, what do you intend to use? Okay, we're gonna spend about 30 seconds more here, but you can see where we're trending. Heavy towards A's and A, selection A and B. So this screen's kind of important because it just exemplifies that across the district, we're doing different things. And that's not necessarily where we want to be, is where everybody's on a different page. So we're gonna talk a little bit today about what options are out there and why we do the things that we do as far as grading. So keep these numbers in mind as we move forward. And if you haven't answered, go ahead, you can still submit it and we can catch it later. So we're going to start today just looking at equity. So we know that equity is the overarching goal for all that we're trying to do across TPS. So when we think about grading, we have to also think about equity. And particularly when we look at just the aspect of grading, we're going to focus on that little right circle that says anti-racist and anti-oppressive organizational standards, policies, and practices. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today, is how does grading fall into these equity practices, and what can we do to increase equity across our grading? So I found this quote from Ibram X. Kendi, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about recently, but it's important that we do this as a system because individual behaviors shape the successes of individuals, but policies determine the success of groups. And it's important that our group policies are impacting all of our students, not just a select few. So let's take a look at the few of the things that you might have encountered in your own student experience. So think back to the days when you were a student. So we're gonna do this little activity where we practice raising our Zoom hands. Okay, so I am going to stop screen sharing for just a moment so that we can all do this activity together. So let's practice raising our hands first. So if you don't know how to do that, just click on the participants button at the bottom and you'll see your name pop up on the side and just click raise hand. And I should see all your little blue hands. So we're just gonna practice doing that right now.
It looks like well, most everyone has raised their hand.
Waiting on just a couple more.
Oh, we got a cop cup.
Okay, all right, I see all of our hands are raised. So now we're gonna lower them all and we're gonna do this activity together. Okay, so first question. Okay, so hands up. So hands up if a teacher has ever refused to take your assignment because it was late. You can scroll through that page and see that's a lot of people on our session right now. Okay, let's try another one. So everybody's hands go down. So lower hand. Next one. Have you ever lost points off of your grade for tardiness, chewing gum, etc., things like that? Hands up if you follow into that. Okay, hands down. Let's try the next one. Hands up if you have ever had a teacher bump your grade up because you tried your hardest. A lot. It's usually the ones who say they got caught for gum, and the people who said they got their grade bumped are two halves of a group. And if they didn't raise their hand on that one, they raised it on the next one. All right, that's a lot of hands up. Okay, hands down here. Next one. Okay, we've got two more. Have you ever received extra credit for bringing classroom supplies, dressing up for Spirit Week, canned food drives, etc.? Yeah, a lot of hands here too. Okay, number 5. Have you ever had your grade lowered for an action other students were not punished for? Okay, hands down. Oh, one more. I didn't see it at the bottom here. Have you ever received different content than other students who had a different teacher for the same course? Lots of hands there. So the reason we talk about this is because these are all different pieces that teachers use to grade students. So when we think about this, let's return to the share screen, and we're going to look at a couple of these reasons. You can lower your hands if they're still up. So let's just think about this. What did that grade actually represent? Maybe it represented timeliness or effort or compliance to norms. Maybe it represented monetary advantages or random teaching or how much the teacher likes you. So now when you have had your grade affected in that way, your grade no longer represents what you know, it represents all of these other things that should not be included in what a grade means. So that's kind of what we're addressing today. So we know that traditional grading practices are inconsistent, they're inequitable, they're hard to manage, and they fail to represent what a student knows. So that's a big problem, and it's systemic across all of education. So what can we do to start addressing this and taking small steps to make grading more equitable across Tulsa Public Schools? So we need to stick to this one point of knowledge. Grades should represent a student's ability to demonstrate a knowledge of standards. I'm going to call that out. It's probably one of the most important things. If it doesn't do this, it shouldn't be graded. So as we aim to increase our equity and dismantle the systemic bias that is present in education, we have to rethink our grading practices. Because no matter what student it is, no matter what school, no matter what district, no matter what state, the one thing that every student gets is a grade. So literally it is the point of impact that we can make across the entire Tulsa Public School District is how we look at grades and getting people on the same page about what a grade should mean and what it represents for our students. It has to mean something. So how can we think grading in our online environments and beyond that? So first, we need to look at research. I love this quote from Guskey: "Opinions are an inadequate substitute for evidence when challenges arise." We are in a challenging situation. If we don't look at research and we just go on opinion, we are not going to make good choices. I always remember this quote, and it's, "A lot of bad decisions were made from opinions strongly held." And so we want to make sure that we're not focusing on opinions, but that we are looking at what research has shown us in the past and help us as we move into this unforeseen future that we're moving into. So what can we do? Let's get some clear steps for us. One is identify the purpose of grading and reporting. There are many purposes, but we need to agree on one across the district. And we need to make sure that we are aligning everything that goes into the gradebook with that purpose. Okay, so Carrie, do we have any questions in the chat that we should address at this point? You're on mute, dear.
So no, I just had, can you guys hear me okay? All right, just had a request for the slide deck for people that I've just been admitting recently, and so I'm putting that in the chat.
Okay, all right, well, if you have anything that pops up, I know we're early here, so just pop it in there. Okay, so let's talk about it. What is the purpose of a grade? It's a lot of things to a lot of people. So I want you to tell me, what's the purpose of a grade? So that should still be up on your phone or on your browser. Just type in a word or a short phrase. If you have more than one, type that in. So you're probably starting to notice some themes emerging out of these texts, right? Different themes coming out. So I definitely see a lot of themes around mastery. I see some on effort. I see a lot of like to gauge, right? To gauge where I'm at. I've seen demonstration of knowledge a couple times for sure. So I'm seeing a lot of stuff here. What I'm not seeing is timeliness. What I'm not seeing is ability to bring in goods, right? So we know that the purpose of a grade, we can all agree on that, that it is kind of founded in these strains of things that we're looking at here. So if you're typing, continue to do so. We're going to go ahead and move to the next slide.
Jen,
Mm-hmm.
is there, does it cap out at responses? Because some people are saying that they're having problems entering responses, that it says it's full.
It might, yeah, because we didn't know the session was going to be so large, so yeah. That's okay. So if you can't get in, I apologize. You can also chat it if that's better. Oh, awesome. When we look at the overall purpose of a grade here, they usually fall into 6 categories. So when we were doing this activity with some teachers across the district, they came up with every reason they possibly could, and then we were able to group them into these 6 categories. So 1, of course, we see to communicate information about students' achievements to parents and others. 2 is to provide information for self-evaluation, and I'll give you 30 seconds to read through those other ones. So we may or may not agree with all of those, but they might say for all teachers who are involved that they might be legitimate, but the problem is that we often try to address all of these things into a single reporting device, which is a grade or that report card. So a truth that we know is that no single reporting instrument can serve all of these purposes well. And in fact, some are counteractive to each other. So even though we might say grades might serve more than one purpose, in order for us to hone what a grade is in our district, we have to agree on one of those purposes. So last year, before the COVID hit, I was working with a team of teachers from across the district, and we collaborated to come up with an agreement on the purpose of a grade. So we used all these Post-its and we moved them around, and they kind of discussed and narrowed it down until they were able to say, we agree on purpose number 2. We are going to provide information to students for self-evaluation. So everything that we put in the gradebook should be something that students have received so that they can self-evaluate where they are in their learning. So that takes away things like, I'm grading for completion. Does completion give a student information for self-evaluation? It doesn't, so it shouldn't go in the gradebook, right? Everything that we do should be providing a student with something for self-evaluation so that they know where they are in the continuum of their learning of the academic standards. So let's think about this. What impact could a shared purpose for grades have on teachers, schools, parents, and students? So we're seeing a lot of consistency, a lot of equity, a lot of expectations. We're all clear on what it means. Just think about the impact it would make on a student if they walked from their science classroom to their English classroom to social studies, and every teacher said, we have the same goal for what a grade represents. You've taken the confusion out of what all that means, and you've also empowered students and parents in the educational process. They know exactly what that grade represents. You can have clearer conversations with them, and your administration isn't saying, well, what is the purpose of this? What are you doing? We can now support each other in that process of what does a grade represent and why is this in the grade book? So again, just to reinforce, so the purpose that we've said, yes, this is what we're going to own, is to provide information to students for self-evaluation. So this is our North Star. So if we're recording it for a grade, it needs to adhere to our purpose. So we all know that we have got to use our district adopted standards to form our instruction, right? We're not going rogue. We're not choosing things that are not on our pacing guides to cover. So grading anything else besides the standards that we've adopted across this district obscures the purpose of the grades, it increases bias, and it makes your grading more challenging for you as a teacher because you have all these other things to look at, and it makes it less effective for students and parents. So how can we do this? How can we serve our purpose for grading, for self-evaluation in our online environment and beyond this? So we're going to look at three main strategies here today. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to encourage the shift away from 0 to 100 point or percentage grading. We're going to focus on standards, not on the assignment and not on compliance. And we're going to use a consistent method that is easy to communicate to stakeholders, whether that's our admin, our parents, our students. We need to make sure that what we're doing provides clear communication about what that grade means. So let's talk about the problem with the 0 to 100 system. So we probably have all gone through the 0 to 100 system in our educational backgrounds, right? So the strange thing about the 0 to 100 system is that it was used somewhat in the early 1900s, but it was rare until we hit the 1980s. And you might guess what started becoming more prevalent in the 1980s, which is computers. So software designers came up with this system that they could sell to schools. And when they sell those to schools, they make money. And they've used their skills as software or computer engineers to mathematize all the grades to this 0 to 100 thing, working on statistics and algorithms and averages, not looking at the human aspect of teaching and learning and growth. So that's one of the problems, is that you don't like it when legislation comes in and tells you how to teach your class. Why are we letting software engineers come in and tell us how we should run our grades? So percentage grades are the most difficult to justify or defend from a procedural, practical, or ethical perspective. So the 0 to 100 percentage scale actually increases teacher bias across grading. So let's take a look at a few studies that have been done. They're super interesting. So the first study was done in 1912. So this is when percentage grades started to be used. So English papers from 2 students were distributed across 147 different English teachers. So they gave them these two papers from these 2 students identically across all these 147 teachers. Paper 1, the scoring ranged from a 64 to a 98 on the same paper. Paper 2, scores ranged from a 50 to a 97 on paper 2. That's not justifiable. So you might say, but English is subjective. There's a lot of bias that might go on there, right? Because it's a teacher. So they did it again in 1913. And they said, okay, let's do it with geometry teachers. So we're going to send these papers with these graded problems to 128 math teachers. Range for the same paper, 28 to a 95%. So what does this actually mean? Wait, this was a long time ago. What about now? This is the 21st century. What are we doing? Let's fast forward to Brimley of 2011. So he repeated the study, did this with 90 high school teachers, and went through 20 hours of training on how to grade these papers on a 100-point scale. So they actually went through several hours of training. 73 out of the 90 graded the paper. Grades ranged from 50 to 96, same results. So these grades do not represent a student's knowledge. So percent grading gives this illusion of precision. We have all these points. You are precisely an 87%. Well, that doesn't actually work. So let's take a look at these 2 scenarios. So I'm aiming at the target. So if my target has 5 degrees of ranges, I can clearly tell where the arrow falls, right? You might think of this as the traditional A through F system, right? I can clearly tell, well, more clearly tell where a student will fall. right? If I throw an arrow, I can see it. Now imagine taking these 5 rings and turning it into 100 and now trying to tell where something has fallen. It's much more complex. It's much more biased and inaccurate because it's hard to see. It's hard to tell. The same thing, you go to your favorite Thai restaurant, you know, you get your 5 levels of spice. What level of spicy do you want? Do you want taste of death or do you want no spice? Or the 5 levels in between? But now instead of giving you 5, I say, okay, from a 0 to a 100, what level of spice do you want? Well, what's the difference between a 44 and a 47? It's incredibly hard to differentiate the skills between those 2 grades that are so close. It's much easier and much more consistent across grading from teacher to teacher and subject to subject if we look at levels of understanding, not particular percentage points. So percent grading also skews towards failure. So another issue, let's just think about this. You can type it in the chat, you can hold up your hands, you can do whatever you want to. So if you were in my new teacher training, you probably got this, so sorry for the repeat. If you're looking at this, how many chances does a student get to get an A? So if we're at a 0 to 100% scale, how many chances to get an A? So from 90 to 100. About 10. Okay, how about a B? How many chances? About 10. C, D, 10, 10. Okay, how many chances does a kid now get to get an F on the 0 to 100 scale? You should have calculated about 60. So now I give a student 60 chances to fail and only, what, 40 chances to pass? So I'm skewing my grades towards failure. That is an equity issue. So let's just take a look at this. In the old type of just ABCDF system, we can see that failing is a small option here, right? And passing the DCBA is weighted more heavily. But now let's look at the percentage grading scale. Now from 0 all the way up to that 59, I have a chance of failing. And passing is now a smaller chance. So what does this do to our students? Let's think about this. It's detrimental to our students feeling like they can be successful. So let's say that I have a student who's turned in 4 assignments and they've gotten a 75% on those 4. Let's say something happens. They had to take care of their sibling, they had a full-time job, who knows, all these things that go on in our students' lives, or they made a mistake and forgot. So now when they turn in the 4 assignments and take the 0 on the 5th, my 75% grade now drops to a 60%, which is a D minus. That is a 15% drop off of 1 grade. Now, let's say the student goes, oh man, I missed that one, and they get an 85% on their next assignment. Their average is now a 64.2%. So that means 1 mistake drops their grade by 15%, while 1B only raises it by 4.2%. Where is my motivation to keep trying if I score higher grades and I get 1 0 and it knocks me down 15%? So chat it. Let's just take a little chat session. If you were this student, how would this impact your motivation in this course? So we're all saying the same thing, right? We would feel like giving up. It doesn't feel fair. It's not representative of what that student knows. It might be representative of a behavior, right? They failed to turn in the grade, but it's not representative of what that student knows. And we need to rethink this system so that we are not disenfranchising our students who are most at risk by punishing behavior over understanding. So this motivation is completely tied to the skewing down of grades, right? Why should I keep trying when I know that it's going to be impossible for me to get the D, the C, the B, the A, whatever that student's going for? They're not going to sit there. They're going to work out the math and figure out what they need to do, right? I want you to think about this. You've probably had this happen to you or heard of happening to a friend. A kid's failing a class. And then the teacher says, okay, in order for you to pass, you've got to make an A on the final exam. And then the kid gets the A and passes with a D. If a kid made the A on the final exam, doesn't that mean that they've mastered all the content for the year? It just took them until the end to get there. So why are they being punished for the sins of their past? Right? But just think about that and what that might do to your motivation if you had the chance to actually get an A, even if you didn't get it early on. So let's just take some of this out of the equation. What would happen if we shifted from, you answered here, it's fine. What would happen if we shifted our scale from 50 to 100? So we took out the 0 and we started at 50. I like that a student would see that one mistake doesn't equate to failure. We all make mistakes, right? What we don't want to do, right. So what we don't want to do is take away hope, right? When we put in those zeros, what we are essentially doing is removing hope from the equation. If I do the things I need to do, I can show that I've improved and actually earn my grade if I've mastered the content or if I've shown a level of proficiency. So let's take a look at these ones and what does this actually do? So there are some doubters and that's fine, but here's what we see. 50 is still a failing grade, right? We have no intention of giving students credit where no credit is due. You will still fail a course if you do not show competency in those standards. We also know that minimum grades such as a 50 to 100 scale do not promote grade inflation and social promotion. Studies have been done, it does not happen. We do intend to eliminate the staggering effect of a 0 in percentage systems. We are trying to reduce the bias that is present in our educational system, and this is one way that we can do this. Okay, questions in the chat. Carrie, any questions of burning intent that we should address? Students who do not turn in work would receive a 50. That's the point of the 50 to 100 scale. Yep, thank you. That's a bigger question, Frederick. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So let's talk about how do we create the shift. So there are 4 things we can talk about today. Now remember, this is an overview. So as we go through this process, Carrie and I and the grading group are going to offer these smaller level PD sessions throughout the year. So you can come in and learn more. But this is enough to kind of get you started and to help you change the way maybe that you're thinking about grading or how to kind of push this into your classes. So 1, we're going to use rubrics and not deductive points. 2, put standards in your grade book, not assignments. 3, only grade students' levels of understanding on standards. So what we mean by that is you need to separate the product from the process, right? What were they eventually able to produce, not how long did it take them to get there. And implement reassessments with requirements. So let's first take a look at rubrics. So we live in a 0 to 100 system, right? That is where we live at TPS. So we need to use our power as teachers to shape it to serve our purpose. You are the owners of the gradebook. The gradebook is not the owner of you. So how can we use rubrics to do this? So shift all of your grading to a rubric. I created some sort of generic rubric that you can modify to fit your standards. So in essence, my students would receive only 1 of 5 grades. If they had no understanding, so they had no ability to demonstrate the standard or performance expectation, or did not attempt, that's a no understanding. If it was rudimentary, you see minimal ability and has major misunderstandings. So let's say in chemistry, maybe they got the formula right, but they weren't able to work the math. Progressing, student can demonstrate the performance expectation with misunderstandings or inconsistencies. Proficient, can demonstrate but with minor misunderstandings or inconsistencies. Mastery, student can consistently and clearly demonstrate the performance expectation. Any errors that are present do not relate to this performance expectation. So what this does is it lets your students see exactly what it means to live in each one of those 5 worlds, right? And it also expresses that it's a continuum. It's not a one shot and that's it approach. So now they're kind of living, right now I'm living in rudimentary, but now I know what I need to do in order to get into progressing or proficient, right? Whatever they need to do. So underneath here, you would just write in, I gave myself spaces to write notes. So on the performance expectation, if a student got a rudimentary, I could mark that they got a rudimentary and leave them a little note about why they live in that space right now. And then the student should be able to piece. So this is the generic one. I'm going to move to the next slide, which has a full one that I used for something like a physical science class. So Carrie, there's a link that's actually linked into that. If you can pop that in the chat, that would be helpful. So why do I use something like this? 1, it's easy to discuss and justify. So whenever I'm talking to a kid or a parent or an admin, I can justify exactly why that student lives in that space of their understanding. 1, it's very useful in a virtual setting. Writing 8 out of 10 on a paper is not useful for a student, right? They don't know where to focus. They don't know what to fix. But if they know that they are, let's say, proficient, but they have some errors, you can easily say, you live here, and this is why, what you need to do to improve. Now, I also put in these, the student should be able to pieces. My numbering got a little off, it looks. But it says student should be able to. So let's say I look at that first standard. So PSPS 2-1. Analyze data to make a claim that predicts the effects of force and mass on acceleration. Let's say they're really strong at that. I can write the number 3 in mastery, right? Because that is where that lives for the student demonstration of knowledge. Let's say on the 4th one where it says use mathematical thinking, let's say that they were able to develop a model, but it did not show the correct relationship. So maybe that would be more at a rudimentary or a progressing. I would write that number there, and now they see where they need to focus. Oh, I'm really strong at analyzing data, but I'm not so strong at mathematical thinking. And overall, that put me at a progressing on this rubric. Students get specific feedback so they know how to improve. And of course, it calls out all of these demonstration of knowledge pieces. So every parent, every student, everybody knows what a student should be able to do by the time they leave that unit. I hand this to my students the first day of a new unit. And the great thing about these is that you can make these before the school year even starts, right? You're not going off and trying to last minute do things. You could actually create these. And then whenever you hit a new unit, bam, every student gets that. They know their expectations and they're monitoring their own progress. So a lot of times at the end, right before I have a student take a summative assessment, they will turn this into me with their marks on where they think they land. And I will grade on top of it so they can see where I'm marking them. It helps them kind of figure out, am I actually assessing my own knowledge very well? Okay, the second thing here is use standards in your gradebook. So most of us, if we look at a gradebook, it says like worksheet or whatever activity they're doing. Instead, set up your gradebook before the year starts and put in every single standard for the units. So unit 1 has 3 standards. I would literally put those in my gradebook so I knew exactly what I was grading the whole year. Because you're grading students' knowledge of standards, not a student's knowledge of a worksheet, not students' knowledge of a lab, but all of these things relate to 1 or more standards that you should be grading according to. So it helps keep a focal point for your students and for you, and it shifts your conversations. It helps us shift our conversation in the following ways. 1, we have to recognize that grades are important. I am guilty of this, of somebody saying, quit focusing on the grade, focus on the learning. And you're like, that's what's important. Well, sorry, that's not true. Like, yes, learning is important, but the grades are what are going to get me into college. The grades are what are going to, help me know like what I'm able to do as far as, doing my applications for post-high school work and all these things. Grades are important, but grades can be talked about in a way that focuses on student understanding, not on points. So it shifts our discussion to that focus of understanding. There's less of why did I get this grade and more of let's talk about how you can improve your understanding, right? Most of my things, I don't talk about percentages. I say you're currently at a rudimentary. Let's talk about what you can do to get up to a proficiency. It shifts that conversation. How can you improve your understanding? It puts the weight on the student's shoulders. If you want to improve, tell me what you need to improve because I've given you the feedback. Kids don't know how to improve unless you've given them the feedback on something like that rubric, where it's clearly pointed out for them. Or you've checked in with them and said, oh, okay, let's look where you would be on the rubric right now for this assignment. Oh, you'd actually be over here. Think about how you should address these specific aspects of your learning. So this is why you are where you are, and this is where you need to focus in order to improve. 3, only grade students' levels of understanding. So now with this system, if we take on this purpose, grades now mean something consistently. They have the right information for self-evaluation, right? You've given them feedback. They've been able to see where they are and how they need to progress. It provides teachers, students, parents, and admin with useful information on students' current understanding and info for improvement. And it is especially useful in clearly communicating in a virtual setting, right? Like we talked about before, that 13 out of 20 doesn't communicate nearly as effectively as looking at that rubric and saying, this is where you are and why you are. And the 4th thing, we're going to implement reassessments with requirements. So first, I want to clearly say that reassessment does not mean retesting. So it's the common misconception that when we say a student should have multiple attempts, that we give them the same assessment over and over again. That is not what we're talking about. Reassessment means that if I have let's say a quiz over Unit 1, and my quiz over Unit 2 encapsulates Unit 2 and Unit 1. It becomes more cumulative so that when that student is ready to be reassessed, it's built into the next one, right? You're not having to do tons more work. You're just building it into the next assessment. And next, students should not be reassessed until relearning has occurred. They have to earn the knowledge to take that reassessment. Taking reassessment without relearning just perpetuates the mistakes over and over. So what does relearning look like? It's up to you, right? It might be completing the missing assignments. It might be correcting missed test questions and explaining why they missed it. It might be verbally explaining a topic to you, or having a short tutoring session on those Wednesdays when we reach out to our at-risk students. It could be just extra practice, like, oh, you really struggled with this one concept. Work these 3 situations and get back to me and let's look at them together again. Right? There are plenty of ways that relearning can occur, but something should be done to make sure that they're ready to be reassessed. Reassessment is for all students. So if they have not demonstrated mastery, they should have the ability to be reassessed. There is no cutoff, right? Well, you already earned the A, you don't get to be reassessed. No, if you haven't reached the mastery level, then let them be reassessed. They're trying to grow, they're trying to learn more and be better. Let's promote that. So if you got it the proficient and you want to go for a mastery, let's do that. Another thing we want to look at, the reassessment needs to represent the current level of understanding of a single standard, not an average. So when they do the reassessment, if they make a D the first time and a B the next time, they shouldn't earn a C, they should earn their current level of understanding. It should be a grade replacement, not an average. Next, students should earn credit for what they learn, not how long it takes to learn it. So if a student is able to show that they've grown and worked really hard, and at the end they're able to demonstrate mastery of several things, replace the grade. If they've done the relearning, if they've taken the reassessment, replace the grade. Our grades need to represent that a student has learned, not how long it took a student to learn. We know we're in the confines of the public school system, right? With our semester grades and things like that. But with the flexibility we have, we need to do what we can. And remember, you control the gradebook, so update it to reflect students' current knowledge of standards, not the average of how long it took them to get there. Okay, maybe we have some questions this time, Carrie?
Yeah, a couple. And I think, like, just as a group, people are doing the job answering each other's questions, so that's nice. So Josh Guy, I'm just gonna use you for an example real quick, asked a really good clarifying question regarding mastery. So Josh is a social studies teacher and just wants to make sure, like, I'm understanding mastery correctly. Like, we're talking mastery of social studies standards, not taking off points because maybe they didn't spell something correctly or something. So yes, like, absolutely. That would be what I would say for mastery. Would you agree, Jen?
Yeah, and I think in that mastery rubric, that's why it says any errors made were not related to this standard, right? So let's say in my world, like chemistry, I'm like, oh, they did the math right and solved the problem, but they didn't use the right number of sig figs. Well, that's not what's being assessed here, right? Same thing for social studies. Like, they may have answered the question really poignantly, but forgot punctuation or made grammar mistakes. That's not part of the standard.
Exactly.
So we don't assess that.
And then someone asked a question about, like, if a student is able to redo an assignment several times, how will that transfer from Canvas to PowerSchool? But someone says Canvas updates. It will update to take the highest grade in attempts, and then at midnight it syncs to PowerSchool. So that's good to know.
Yeah, it syncs every night, yeah.
And then, so, but there is, and like, these questions are more around, like, the logistics, like, how do we enter 2 grades per student per week? That sort of thing. So if you have any thoughts on that, you can share. But those are the sort of the questions that are popping up.
Absolutely. And remember, just because you record a grade for that week doesn't mean you can't go back and change it later. So, right, everything a student is doing, remember, if they're getting feedback on it, you can pick 2 of those a week. You're probably giving feedback on more than that. But let's say that you've walked around and you've had a conversation with a student that said, can you explain this concept to me? And they explain it and you go, okay, that puts you, you're looking at a progressing right now, and let's talk about why. One, you've just done an assessment that you can record for a grade for that week. And then you've had an interaction with a student where you've immediately given feedback to counteract any misunderstandings. So you've literally assessed them and graded them in, a minute swoop. And then if that knowledge improves, let's say like on the test or the summative, they're able to explain that concept at a much more proficient or mastery level, you can go back and change that grade, right? There's no reason that has to stay where it is. It's still 2 grades a week, and you can still update those grades as students' knowledge updates. Anything else, Carrie, for this time? Good. Okay, guess what? So that's going to be the end of today. So we are going to have more sessions planned throughout this year. And we hope that you're going to take some time to join us. They'll be on the PD Wednesdays, and I'm hoping to do something like 10 sessions from now until like the end of the year, so that you can learn more and start implementing more. There's enough here for you to implement. Yes, it's going to be a little bit of a shift, but you're going to find it's much easier to grade, and your grades are going to have a lot more meaning. And that's really the goal of this, is to eliminate that bias in grading so that students understand and parents understand what a grade means at TPS. So I hope that you join us for those sessions. We'll be sending out info on those as they get developed. Carrie and I are going to stay on this for a little bit longer, and then she's going to copy paste the form for this session to confirm your attendance. So you have about 30 minutes to complete your assessment, and we're going to stick on here in case you have any logistical questions or just want more info to help you make this happen in your classroom. I want to thank you so much. I know that your time is valuable, and I know that we're all facing our own personal and professional struggles right now, and I thank you for listening to this with an open mind and working to make TPS a more equitable place. So thank you.